Ladies, welcome to another fantastic Ladies Beyond Flying Aviation Women panel. It's the 27th. My name is Daniel Stecher, Vice President Airline Operations Aviation Software. And it's a big pleasure to have you today with us with a fantastic guest speaker. And one always meets twice in lifetime. That's what my father taught me. And Claire and I, we met at the NACO conference. I think it was autumn 2017. And then a couple of years back, we came together again. We have meanwhile also created another initiative and community in the specific field of airline crewing. And we were also discussing, wow, why not also giving Claire the stage to share her very long career in airline operations as a leader. And that's exactly what it's all about. So Claire, the stage is yours.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me, Daniel, and thank you all for attending my presentation today. I'm hoping that I can share, especially for those newer to the industry, some inspiring and perhaps entertaining stories for you. And then even to those who may have more experience than I do, maybe it will inspire you to reflect on your journey and do the same. So I'm going to share my screen now. Can you all see?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. My name is Claire Taitte, and I had a 20-year career at Southwest Airlines, which is the largest domestic carrier here in the United States. Let's see. Are my slides advancing? Okay, great.
Yes.
So this you can see was my badge picture from my very first day walking into the Southwest Airlines lobby on July 10th, 2000. And you can see I had taken a selfie on that same location in the Southwest Airlines lobby. 20 years later, I took a selfie on my last day, which was 2 years ago yesterday. So I walked into the lobby of the Southwest Airlines headquarters building on my first day as an in-flight crew scheduler. And this is the same lobby, like I said, that you can see on the right-hand side. I had no idea what the job entailed at that time. And when I came in, I told someone I was starting as an in-flight crew scheduler, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry." At the time, we had no training program, training manual, or any sort of manual for that matter. We sat in a conference room learning basic rules, airport codes, and crew legalities for about a week. And then I sat with various schedulers on the scheduling floor. And then one day they just needed me to answer the phones on my own that day because we were short-staffed, as often crew scheduling departments are. And that was my training in crew scheduling. So I did fairly well as a crew scheduler. It took some time to gain respect, though. At least one supervisor didn't care for me. And you can see her frustration on this report I found in my mailbox one morning where I had forgotten to write inbound reserve information on a reserve report. We had to write that all manually. And I had forgotten, being busy on my shift the night before. And I just walked in one day to her writing in bright orange marker inbounds with question marks and "why didn't you do this?" So it was obvious to me that I had simply forgotten, but she took this opportunity to try to make me feel small. So a little over a year after I started, I was in Oakland, California, assisting at a new hire flight attendant base orientation. We used to do that in person back then. I turned on the news as I was getting ready at the hotel, and I saw the second plane hit the Twin Towers on the television. That day was September 11th, 2001. All the flights were grounded in the US for 3 days. I came back to the worst operational crisis I had experienced so far in my career as a one-year scheduler. It took 3 flights to get back to Dallas. And then as soon as I landed, I went to Southwest headquarters right next to the airport, and I worked until 6 a.m. the following morning. That was my first 24-hour workday in crew scheduling, but it certainly wasn't my last. September 11, 2001 halted the period of growth and prosperity that Southwest Airlines had experienced up to that point. For the years following that, it was a struggle. There was no growth, there were no promotions. Right before then, I'd taken a test to upgrade to a higher level of a scheduling position, but that was put on hold indefinitely. It came a year or so later. So you can see here, when I started, we still printed out the aircraft flow sheets and marked crew information on them for my first couple years as a crew scheduler. We didn't have any sort of crew info in our flight tracking system or any estimated times in our crew scheduling system. To find crew misconnects, we would pull up the delayed flights in our flight tracking system, and we would go in our crew scheduling system and list the crew on every flight to see if they would misconnect to their next flight. Not a very efficient way to do that. This got much easier once we had crew information in the flight tracking system, and then we also developed a system with a company called Caleb Technology at that time. It's now part of GE Aviation. We implemented a crew solver system, so that had problem detection and also optimized solutions. And I volunteered to help with that project early in my scheduling career, and that was actually my path to leadership, was volunteering for technology projects. So after a couple of years in crew scheduling, I decided I enjoyed working on technology projects, and I applied to work in a department that partnered with technology to implement such projects, but I did not get that position. I also applied to become a crew scheduling supervisor, and I also was not selected for that position the first time I put in. But eventually I tried again in late 2004, and I was selected for the supervisor role. And coincidentally, it was the role that came open when that same scheduling supervisor, who often tried to make me feel small, had left to go become a flight attendant. So I thought that was funny. 1 year later, in-flight scheduling added a second assistant manager role, and my manager at the time convinced me to apply. That's him in the right in this picture. His name was Roy Hood. I never saw myself as a leader or a manager, but I loved working with him, and he inspired me to be a leader. Days before my first day in the role, he died in a tragic car accident. I had lost a dear friend, the reason I wanted to be a leader, and I had an immense amount of responsibility alone. Within the first month of my time as an assistant manager in crew scheduling, Southwest Flight 1248 went off the runway, causing the death of a child and terrible operational chaos. Shortly after that, the other assistant manager in crew scheduling decided she didn't want to do the job anymore and went back to be a scheduler on the floor. I was really alone, managing crew scheduling as a 26-year-old with about 1 year of leadership experience. 1 year after that, I lost Tony Whelan, my closest friend at work, who died of a heart attack at age 40. This time it fell to me to communicate to everyone at work, organize the service, and coordinate with his family back in his home country of Ireland. Being such a young manager in scheduling, it was hard for some, including the union, to take me seriously. One union leader blabbed to unknowingly to a friend of mine about the little girl managing crew scheduling. So what happened right after that was I testified for about 7 hours in an arbitration about a crew scheduling grievance dispute. And the union put what I perceived as a caricature of me on a postcard they mailed to all flight attendants as a campaign to put scheduling, to put pressure on scheduling to change a policy. It said, "We don't care, we're crew scheduling." And I perceived that to be a caricature of me on the postcard. I felt humiliated and angry. And about a year later, I went to manage crew planning and headed into the Great Recession. Again, Southwest faced great challenges, jobs were at stake, and questions of furloughs came up. This is the Southwest stock price, my first 10 years in my career. So you can see that there were no gains. In fact, the stock price on my 10th anniversary was $3 a share lower than it was on the day that I started. And so much for the stock options that I had heard made so many employees wealthy in the early years of Southwest. That was not my experience in the first 10 years. The few years following that were years of great change and growth for Southwest. The AirTran acquisition resulted in converting AirTran flight attendants to Southwest. We made technology changes to bring on a fourth flight attendant position when we brought on our 737-800s, because prior to that, it had always been 3 flight attendants on every flight, which was, of course, hard-coded in all of our systems. We made changes to start flying internationally. We prepared for FAR 117 and our new NOC in our new building. During this time, I was a director responsible for in-flight crew scheduling, planning, and payroll. I had the reputation of a workaholic, frequently working 60 to 80-hour weeks. In fact, at the end of 2013, I had what was called a 360 evaluation, which solicited feedback from my leader, my peers, my direct reports, and then also I evaluated myself. So I'll share with you what I learned. So these are my top 5 items. Number 1, works hard, puts in extra time and effort. Number 2, embraces problem solving. Number 3, lives up to commitments. Number 4, learns on the fly. Number 5, desires to be the best, sets personal standards of high personal standards of performance, which that sounds pretty good, right? But then we get into the bottom 5 items. So these were my bottom 5 items. My worst item at an average rating of 2.43 was maintains an effective balance between work and personal life. Number 2, delegates responsibilities. Number 3, delegates enough of own work to others. Number 4, builds great team and organizational bench strength. And number 5, has fun. All of these stung a bit. It seems clear that I was all work and no play at that time. And if I had any questions about what people thought, people were able to write in comments that I could see. So this first comment says, and these were both from direct reports, so people who reported directly to me at that time. One says, I would like to see improvements with work-life balance. You shouldn't need your vacation as much as you want your vacation. Sometimes I feel like Claire really needs her vacation when it comes around. Ouch. Number 2, I would love to see Claire develop a better work-life balance. Not only would it be healthier for her, but her team would understand this is not an expectation as well. Though she verbally states it is okay for others to have that balance, it can make others feel guilty if she is not doing the same. So I thought I was being a superhero by working all of these extra hours. Not only was I harming myself, but I was harming those on my team who I was trying to serve.
Are you allowing questions right now or at the end? What is your preference?
I think at the end, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I didn't truly learn my lesson, though, until a couple of months later. So right after that, so that was December 2013, January 2014, we had what we called the polar vortex, and we had a terrible winter storm the very first week of January, which was also the week we implemented FAR 117, the new pilot rules for fatigue. And I worked on that first day over 30 hours in a row, and that first week 100 hours. We always used to say we knew it was a bad day in crew scheduling when we walked in and saw a stack of pizza boxes, and there you see in the photo a stack of pizza boxes. Although the food got a little bit better each day as the storm progressed. Terrible IROPS continued throughout that month, in addition to merging of the airlines, preparation to move into our new NOC, preparations to host the NACU conference later that spring, and I'm sure a few other things that I'm forgetting. I needed a break so much that when I noticed a lump in my pelvis, I was hoping that I might need surgery and be able to take a bit of a leave. I had no idea that several weeks later I would receive a cancer diagnosis, giving me much more than a short break. I had Hodgkin's lymphoma and I started chemo 10 days later. So this is me, my first day of chemo in March 2014. You might be wondering right now, where is she going with this? This sounds like a terrible story. So most of you don't know me personally or how I came to the airline industry. I came to Southwest without any special skills or education in aviation. I had just finished college at age 20 with a psychology degree, not really knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to be a counselor, but I thought I should get some job and life experience before getting my master's degree, which is what's required here in the US to become a counselor. And also, who wants to go to a 22-year-old counselor, right? I had never used Excel. I had no aviation background. I had barely flown, and I had no business background. Sometimes it's hard to see the value of hardships until we take the time to zoom out. All of those hardships gave me great leadership and career opportunities. Because we didn't have a training program in scheduling, I had to push myself to learn and grow. Because we didn't have great technology tools to help us do our jobs, we had the opportunity to partner with technology to build a better way. Because we had headcount and hiring constraints for so long, we were able to learn the skills we needed to build an analytics team rather than hire for them. We didn't know SQL, Tableau, or Alteryx when we formed our analytics team. We did all of that on the job. Each time I faced an insurmountable challenge or a crazy IROPS day, I could look back on 9/11 and remember how we eventually recovered from that operational chaos. I could look back on the Great Recession and remember how we came up with creative ideas like voluntary leaves to save jobs. I could look back on all the times a supervisor or hiring manager told me I wasn't good enough and realize that I knew my own worth and that my time would come. I could remember that I managed scheduling alone as a little girl and continued to grow in my success as different union regimes came in and out. When I lost someone, or when I knew someone who lost a loved one, I could remember how I got through the loss of two dear friends and coworkers in 1 year. I could remember that an airline merger causing crazy amounts of stress and many grueling business trips resulted in gaining wonderful coworkers and lifelong friendships. And this is Mark Sutcliffe, who I met during the AirTran merger, and he's still at Southwest. He's one of my closest friends and was one of my favorite colleagues during that time. The best things that happened to me came from what many would see as the worst circumstances. I always joked that the polar vortex gave me cancer, but cancer was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Through my illness, I took control back of my life and I prioritized my health and my life outside of work. I finally understood the importance of empathy, the importance of being there for someone during their most difficult time. I was able to make the career change that I craved, step back from some of my responsibilities, and help build my department's first dedicated analytics team. And most of all, I learned to be a better leader. Instead of taking the workload on myself, trying to be a workaholic superwoman, I finally learned to delegate and give others the opportunity to lead and grow. I came to Southwest with no specialized skills and no real ambition. I was going to get a few years of job and life experience before going back to get an advanced degree. And I left with over 15 years of leadership experience, years of experience partnering with technology to build better solutions, years of analytical experience, many travel adventures, an amazing amount of resilience, and a wonderful family of people I met during the journey. The early retirement package offered during the COVID crisis allowed me to take all of these opportunities I had over the previous 20 years and use them for my next chapter in life. And right now, I know that the airline industry is struggling with great challenges. So we've got all of the post-COVID staffing volatility, the effects of the war in Ukraine, threats of economic recession looming, I know especially if you started in your aviation career the past 5 to 10 years, things may seem especially bleak. And this, just to refer back to the Southwest stock, the first 10 years of my career, if you look back at the Southwest stock for the previous 5 years, this is what it looks like. So again, not terribly hopeful from a financial perspective. But sometimes it's good to zoom out. The first 10 years of my career were a constant struggle, and then look at the prosperity that followed over the next few years. So as you continue working in the airline industry through this time of volatility and crisis, you have the opportunity to find opportunities within the constraints. You have the opportunity to drive change. You have the opportunity to learn new skills. You have the opportunity to create new ways to solve problems. You have the opportunity to develop more empathy and to see others' perspectives. You have the opportunity to create a new time that you can look back on in 5, 10, or 20 years and say, I got through this when the next crisis arises. Because there will always be a crisis in the airline industry, there will always be a tragedy, and there will always be someone who tells you no. And you can have the choice to wallow in despair, to complain, or to lose hope, but you can also take this as an opportunity. It takes courage to drive change, to work through a crisis, and to learn a new skill. It takes courage to take a stand and be a leader. It takes courage to draw boundaries and prioritize your health and family over a culture that glorifies hustle, money, and profit over everything else. And I'll leave you with one quote that I really enjoy from psychologist Susan David. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is fear walking. And I would say in our industry, it maybe is fear flying. So I would just encourage all of you to keep flying.
Wow. Thank you very much. If somebody's asking me why, Daniel, you are doing Ladies Beyond Flying is exactly for something what you just did. Fantastic presentation. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for having me.
So all the others are speechless. I have a question, of course, but in my culture we say ladies first. So ladies, please raise your hand if you have a question or two, except you are speechless. Hopefully not speechless in a positive sense, but hopefully not really.
Thank you for such an amazing story. Like I was amazed, like literally, because I'm here in aviation, like let's call it like beginner, like compared with your story, my way still like or my path is still like in the beginning. If I may ask you, yeah, how are you now, like dealing with the like work and private life balance? I think this is like in aviation is key because honestly, for me, it's kind of very like hard to get the balance because I'm the beginner here in aviation. I need to prove myself. You know, it's therefore like most of the time it's work. Thank you.
Yes, that's a great question, and I would also ask some of the others in this panel. So I don't know if I have a specific advice on what to do. I certainly have advice on what not to do based on my story. I think one thing I would say is I think we maybe try to prove ourselves oftentimes more than we really need to. And I know that because of my age and, probably somewhat because of my gender at that time, 20 years ago, even in the US, the airline industry, especially in operations, was a good old boys club. And crew scheduling was fairly diverse, but certainly on the leadership stage above a manager level, there were mostly men. And so I think I I know in crew scheduling also, there's always a badge of honor of like who can work the hardest and who can work the most. And it was almost bragging rights to say I worked 24 hours in a row or 30 hours in a row. And I think, you have to weigh the culture of your own airline and your own department. But I think just advocating for your people, especially if you're a leader, to say, I know we have trouble recruiting new schedulers because the job is so difficult and they work many hours, that if we want to keep good people, then we need to try to hire more or try to do things to allow them to keep a balance. And so try and advocate for yourself and your people in by explaining, what the benefit to the organization is, because I think, working those hours is not sustainable for a long period of time. And if you can point even to others outside yourself of why we need to do this, I think kind of proving, what's in it for me, and not me as in you, but what's in it for the executives or your leaders to make that decision, to give extra resources or have more realistic expectations. I think that is one way to address that challenge. I don't know if that is helpful.
It is, thank you. Sometimes someone just need to set this kind reminder, and you did it to me. You just put a dot to I that all the time I felt the same. You just kind of reminded what is the real worth in the life. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Claire, my question would be, because it was probably a shock for you when you got this 360-degree feedback and you saw all the areas of improvement or the weaknesses. When you were then looking back in your in your past, you were also so ambitious in school. You were always trying to do everything on your own, or was this rather to the situation that you try to really prove that your leadership is correct, and you are not so that you are developing this kind of behavior due to the surrounding, or was it always your behavior to try to fix things totally alone?
I certainly have always struggled to ask for help. I was not terribly ambitious in wanting to promote or anything like that. I didn't really have any business ambitions when I started at Southwest. But I always had high standards for myself. So I always wanted to do a good job. When I wrote papers in university, I would stay up late trying to make it perfect. And I was really hard on myself if I didn't have good grades in school and things like that. But I would say I've always had a hard time asking for help, and I still sometimes struggle with it. I didn't all of a sudden become perfect by getting a cancer diagnosis, but I think that it did teach me that, we live in a world where we all depend on each other. I mean, that's what society is. If I lived out in a forest, I would probably die in one day because I don't know how to gather food and purify water, and maybe some of you know how to do that, but we all depend on each other for various parts of life. And I think I don't know what I had to prove to myself or what I thought I needed to prove to other people, but I think some of it might also be the American culture of independence and self-reliance, which I know is not the case everywhere.
Just before I give the word to Gunas, I have a second question on that, because we were discussing this in earlier sessions, and that is at the moment my, let's say, analysis why maybe women are not progressing, because, and now I'm accounting myself also to the group of women, we are bad in networking. And when you were getting these feedback from your managers, and you were even getting these stickers from the crew members and so on at the union who made jokes about you. Was this the moment where you were trying to find allies in your team to somehow question what they are doing? Is this correct, or were you still trying not to ask for help and try to digest all these bad words from the union representatives on your own?
I mean, that was probably 7 years before my cancer diagnosis. So I think it probably only got worse from there. You know, I was a new manager. I was a new manager when those postcards came out. And I think, you know, that just probably made me want to prove myself more, that I wasn't a little girl in over her head, that I could do good things, and I enjoyed the work. I mean, it was interesting work I was doing at that time. It was an interesting time to be a leader, but it also it didn't make me enjoy my job, to, you know, have postcards with what I perceived to be as a caricature of me on them. And you know, a lot of, if those of you who work with unions, I mean, unions are very important for society in many ways, I acknowledge. But if you're in management, and especially if you're trying to do something like working all of those hours managing crew scheduling or another operations group, you know, your job is very difficult too, and you're just dealing with the work rules that were negotiated for you, and you know, some of the direction from your leadership. So you can be kind of stuck in the middle and feeling that pressure. But I think my instinct was to work harder and fight more. So I don't think I really asked for help at that point.
Thank you. Gonas, you raised your hand.
Yeah, thank you. Claire, seriously, your story is so inspiring, and really it took my words away, that it really takes courage to go through all this. And especially when you had to go through get to know about your cancer and go through the treatments and things like that. But at any point of time, knowing you being a workaholic person, an ambitious person, did you feel that the other colleagues or people were actually sympathizing towards you, instead of, like, you know, giving a strong support hand, but a sympathy and pushing you forward? So do you think you felt a little low at that point, that, oh, now they think I'm a little weak kind, or was it different with you?
Yes, I think, you know, it was certainly humbling. And I don't know if any of you have gone through an illness or a health problem, or even a problem in your personal life that others know about. But it was very hard for me to, you know, I worked throughout my illness. So I would take off the week that I had chemo. It was every other Monday for 4 months. But I would work on the other weeks when I was feeling better. So I worked every other week, and I knew, you know, in aviation, your coworkers are almost kind of like your family in a way. So we all knew each other, and they were not only taking on extra workload at that time, which was one of our busiest times at the airline, but they were also very sad. And I was coming in to work, you know, looking kind of sicker and sicker, and my hair thinning out, and I felt, you know, really self-conscious about it. And sometimes I chose to be very open about my illness. So I sent an email out to the department, because I had probably reporting up through me maybe around 100 people on my team at that time. But the airline was quite large. Southwest at the time maybe had 40,000 people. I didn't send an email to 40,000 people, but I sent an email to the people in my department, and I shared on social media what I was going through at the beginning. So that led to a lot of support, but I also felt like there were a lot of eyes on me. And sometimes that can feel good, sometimes that can feel bad. There's a weird thing, and this made me feel kind of self-conscious and low. I had like many Facebook friend requests from random people that I knew during that time. Like they wanted to kind of watch and see what I would look like bald or something like that. That was kind of a weird thing. So I remember, people making a lot of comments on my appearance, like, oh, you're losing weight, or oh, you look good bald. People make comments they think are helpful and sometimes aren't. But I would say for the most part, there was so much support, and I realized that that support was always available. People always cared about me. I just never asked for help before that. But when I really needed it, I felt like, in fact, right before I had my diagnosis, during that sort of workaholic period, I was so miserable and I didn't feel like I could ask for help. That we needed more staffing, or I needed less responsibility, and I didn't think I could change jobs at Southwest. I was looking for jobs outside of Southwest. I was interviewing for a couple jobs outside the company, one at another airline and one in a completely different industry. And fortunately, I didn't get those jobs, because if I had gotten those jobs and had a diagnosis, I would have been, potentially living in a new city, in a new job with this diagnosis, and I would have had to, maybe leave the new job and move back home. So it worked out really well for me that I didn't get those jobs. And also, the people around me, you saw in the picture, there were multiple people who shaved their heads with me. My vice president at the time, he organized a rally and had a couple people come in and offered to shave heads of anyone who wanted to shave their head in support of me when I was losing my hair. So I think about 15 people shaved their heads with me on that day. And I got so many cards and so many offers of help, and so many people who I never realized cared, who offered to do things for me. And that was really inspiring. And I think that just kind of made me realize, how special all the people that I worked with were, and how they were there for me all along if I needed to ask for help. And if they knew how miserable I was and how close I was to leaving the airline, if I had just asked my boss for help at that time, or some of my coworkers to pick up extra, maybe they would have been, more willing to do that. Maybe it wouldn't have taken cancer to have people help out more.
Wonderful.
In airline management, there is always a root cause analysis and the desire to understand where things were going not in the right direction or not planned. And so if you now look back, do you have a root cause analysis? Was there something many years ago which were somehow influencing you that you were acting like you acted? So with other words, what would you change if you can go back to the past in order not to have then all the situations you were just describing earlier?
I mean, I would say some root cause analysis for me being a workaholic had to do with the environment. So working in the airline industry, those first 10 years in my career, it was 9/11 and the recession and all of these hardships. It wasn't necessarily possible to ask for extra headcount at that time. Or I didn't feel like it was possible to ask for extra headcount at that time, or to reduce projects, because we all know in most business environments, even in airline operations, there's a lot of unnecessary work. There are project reports we need to fill out, or, kind of flavor of the month projects and work that we want to do. I mean, it's different in crew scheduling, where you're covering flights when you're on, the floor working the shifts. But in most management jobs, there's a lot of stuff that's really not that important. And I think some of it was environmental, but I think also some of it was me just not having the courage to ask for help. So I think that that part I would have to look inside of me, because I would imagine there were probably other managers who said, oh, well, we can't do this work without, 2 extra people, and they were probably given those headcount at that time. So I think it's just realizing how it benefits the organization when you do ask for more resources, because I didn't really realize that I put my department at a great disadvantage when I said, oh yeah, we don't need to add another manager position, or we don't need to hire more schedulers. We can do more with less. That I was trying to prove that we were smarter and more efficient than everyone else, but really it just meant that I was working my team to death and myself to death.
Aditi, you raised your hand.
Yeah, firstly, I just want to say, Claire, you were amazing as always. Like, of course, this part of you I did not know of. But whenever I have been observing you and I've heard you all this while, you've always been very inspirational. So till now, of course, it was more on the professional side of the passion that you still have for the industry. I think it's beautiful, the amount of passion you have for anything that you do. And I think whatever you mentioned today was a testimony of where the passion really comes from. So I think I understand so much more now of where that passion, where that energy is coming from to give back to the society so much more. So I would just really would like to appreciate your efforts first.
Oh, thank you.
It's beautiful, like genuinely very touching, whatever you went through and the support you got. I'm sure it's a learning for all of us in different ways. That's one. Second, I would want to talk about the 360, Claire. So when I noticed some of these things as well, I implemented this entire 360 concept for my team too. What I was hearing was a lot of times when people give feedback, this 360 is a little about perception management and a little about really work to be done for an individual. And there's a very thin line between the two, that where an individual really accepts the feedback in terms of what needs to change, versus sometimes it's a discussion we end up having that it's a perception that people have around you that you need to change. So when you were given that feedback, were you thinking at that point of time more like it's a perception, but I'm cool doing what I'm doing and I know I can still go ahead with it? Or did you really take it retrospectively, went back and started actioning there and then?
That's a great question. I would say at that time I took the feedback as, well, what else am I supposed to do? Like I was helpless to change it. And I really wasn't surprised by it. I mean, I knew it was a problem. I had left, in the airline industry. I don't know if it's like this in all parts of the world, but usually in the US, like the December New Year's holiday for us, it's, Christmas. It's the worst time. So we have like the most crew absences, we have bad weather, and no one wants to pick up extra flying. And so those were always terrible. So, for the same reason that, customers want to fly, crews prefer to be off, that's kind of a normal thing. But it also meant that any family plans I had, I really didn't keep. I left many like family holiday dinners to go, work. I remember one summer leaving my grandmother's birthday lunch because there was some crisis on a Sunday at work. So I knew it was a problem. And I think there's a time for working long hours when there is an actual crisis, sure, but not every day is a crisis. And if you're always working that much, that's a staffing problem at the airline. That's a personal decision. It's not a crisis. So I think I just didn't see a way out other than leaving. So I knew I needed to make a change, but I just thought that, that change for me was leaving the industry, which is silly because probably I would have gone and worked somewhere else and done the exact same thing. But yeah, I think 360s are valuable if they're ready to hear the feedback, and also if your team has the support to implement the changes as well from their leaders. So if you're administering this to your team, you know, they have to feel supported that they can make the changes as well.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the reason why I brought out, because 360 is extremely powerful if if the right person gives you that feedback in the right manner, and then kind of take you through that journey to come out of it, versus more like communicating in a victimized manner that this is what is going wrong and you need to fix it. So I think in our own ways, all of us can always make that additional effort to help people through the 360 process and make it sound more positive on what can be constructively done. So thank you for bringing that out, Claire.
Yes, thank you.
Camille, you are pretty fresh to the industry and also pretty fresh to this Ladies Beyond Flying. So is there any comment from yours? I put you on the spot, sorry for that, but we met in person and I know you can handle it. So could you get some good tips for your own career now?
Of course. First of all, thank you very much, because I heard a whole adventure of your life, actually, and an aviation life as a woman. So thanks for sharing, because when you tell something about yourself, I see myself on you, because I cannot ask for help to the people while working or in social life. So I took some tips from you. Thanks for all things that you shared.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you for that. And I think too, and maybe it is, I mean, it seems like it's a theme. I'm hearing from all of you that it's hard to ask for help. And I don't know, do men have trouble asking for help too? Is it just a human thing, or is it a women, more of an issue with women? I don't know, because I'm not a man. So maybe Daniel, you can help us.
Yeah, I think it all comes to personality type. Yeah, that's the
Or
first
maybe
thing.
culture.
It's because I'm convinced asking for help is a strength, whereas I would say the majority of people in the world perceive asking for help as a weakness. But I think nobody can handle everything on its own. On the other hand, of course, it always depends from experience. I made always good experience by asking for help, because interestingly, many people like to help. So that's exactly the thing. By asking for help, you realize, oh, everybody is somehow open for help, like here in this community. So we have our community, and we can ask all community members for help. And interestingly, there are many who like to help. So that's the one thing. So I think that's it has nothing to do with male and female. It's really a personality thing. And yeah, so I think that's my conclusion. So there are potentially many male who don't like to ask for help, and the other way around, and the same for females on Earth. So it's that, but it's my own, let's say, conclusion. I might be wrong.
I agree too, Daniel. I think the whole idea of creating Ladies Beyond Flying and our entity discussions or other discussions in other groups was that everyone can come out and talk about different issues that they're facing. And there are people, we don't see enough people joining sometimes, but whoever really ends up joining are actually the people who are really wanting to help. And the more people open up, more they help, more they hear other people getting help, we'll see even more people really coming out with the real issues that they have. So something that you brought out, Claire, today would be an inspiration for so many others. Maybe a lot of people would be facing these issues. But unless we come out, discuss, talk about these things, they won't even realize that there are people who are there to listen to them, and there are people who can actually help them with their problems. No one is having out of the world problems. We're all learning from each other all point of time. So we just have to believe it, that there are people, and you'll always find one.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. And even I think that's true on a broad scale, so even outside of the business world. But if for those of us who are leaders, who have people on our team, I mean, one of the things I realized from this and in not delegating, I got much better at delegating in the later years of my leadership career. And I realized that most people want to take on extra, and I'm not saying extra work hours, but they want to take on new projects or new assignments. And I always thought, oh, well, I don't want to burden my team with this, but they wanted to learn, and that was how they would learn and grow. And so I got much better at that. But I also realized as a leader, and I think Anne had made a couple of comments that I just noticed. She said, I love when you say it's a staffing issue and not a crisis, and we can't have perpetual crisis. We have to make sure we as leaders are staffing our departments appropriately so that we can give them extra assignments if we want them done well. Because if we are a superhero leader who's trying to be the smartest person in the room and do the best work, that's a detriment to the organization. Because we would always say, well, make sure you document your work, in case you get hit by a bus. And maybe a nicer way to say that is win the lottery. But I got cancer and I wasn't available. So because I was, trying to be the person in all of the meetings and be the person assigned to all of the projects, I put the organization at great detriment by not including my team and not delegating more. So it wasn't even just the burden it put on me. It actually was bad for the organization, and it didn't give my team the opportunities as well. And that's a way to think of it. If you're prone to thinking of yourself as a superhero, is you're actually not doing your job well if you don't delegate appropriately or share some of your knowledge and your opportunities with your team.
Which comes again then to this topic of networking, because if you network and if you discuss things openly about whatever is on your heart, you exactly hear, oh, I want to help you, I want to have more responsibility, I want to take this project. So maybe that's the solution exactly for this problem. Potentially also maybe from some stereotypes and so on, you could believe that maybe women tend to believe, I will not ask a man, I will do it on my own. My wife said sometimes to me, I will not ask you to take care of the cat, I do it myself. So that's a natural reaction if maybe the person is not good in something. But I think that comes really to this point. Networking is key because it's helping you to have your team members potentially for any kind of problem. And I'm also saying to any person in the world, if you have a problem, ask me, potentially I have a solution because I know somebody who might help. On the other hand, I have also the tendency to try things initially on my own because I'm not patient enough. But on the other hand, it is always, I think, more fun and also a greater success if you do this in a team. So that's why teamwork, I think, is key, and delegating is very efficient. Any other question from the audience?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you very much, Claire, for sharing your story. So it was really, a great inspiration. I'm also self-employed, working for an airline as a consultant, and I think it comes to that helping others. I very often have the problem with all these managers and firefighters busy all the time with short-term ops, etc. And then I come with transformation and culture projects because I'm currently doing a transformation project there. And I always find it very hard as a consultant to go in and to get their attention, and to think about strategic issues. And I don't know if you could share maybe your tips also as consultant, to inspire them to also, sometimes think a little bit more than next week.
Well, I'm kind of at my walking into the lobby on my first day as a crew scheduler point in my consultancy career, because I've only just started that this year. So I don't know that I have tips as a consultant, I would just say as a leader. So if I was coming into a new role, I think I would just reflect. And this is also, in some of my training as a mediator. So I also am trained in conflict resolution in the state of Texas, and act as a mediator. Just pointing it back to their overall organizational goals. So why they want the transformation and why they want the change in the first place, and ask the question, is this, how is this behavior helping you? And you have to balance with personalities, because I know different cultures, you don't want to offend anyone, but if they're trying to make, for example, a 5-year technology change or a 5-year culture change, and they're too busy to focus on it, just say, okay, fast forward in 5 years. Do you want to be in the same place you are today and 5 years older, or do you want to be, in a place of change? And if so, what are some things we can do to start that now? What are some things, and some of it is, what are some things you can stop doing right now so that you can focus on that? What can you say no to? And I think if we're all honest, even in airline operations, there's a lot of work we can say no to that's unnecessary. And again, just pointing back to what's in it for them, what's in it for the organization. And if they say, well, my boss needs this report from me, or they need me to do this, going back and saying, well, I think they also want you to be able to implement this new system in 5 years. So, that might be a good question of what is it okay for me to say no to so that I can accomplish this goal?
I love that question. I think I will take that to the next workshop. What can you say no to today, right? So something where they still, where they don't have to think so much about it, but maybe change it immediately. Yeah. Good. Nice. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we have the 1st of December, because usually you can use the November as a month to say more often no, because that's called November.
Yeah. Thank you. I will put it as a reminder as 31st of October next year. Yeah, that's cool.
So thank you very much, Claire. I think that was a fantastic session. And again, that was very inspiring. I'm so glad that we just started our next adventure, the Enigma, where you're also a driving force. And I appreciate all our interactions. And so looking forward to many more sessions in this context. And the December is very special month, because we have 2 aviation women panel in 1 month, because already in 2 weeks we have the next one, where Teresa from Grupo Stata, the CFO, is talking, and so hopefully we could inspire many of you to also come and join the session. And then for next year we have already scheduled many more aviation women panel. Please spread the word about our community. And you just need to find people who are smart, positive, enthusiastic, and upbeat, and then they qualify to be member of Ladies Beyond Flying. So thank you again, Claire, for this fantastic and inspiring session, and also to the audience for all your questions. If we do not see each other till the end of the year, I wish you a very healthy and successful 2023, and please stay healthy and safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.